still here in the loop, which is very exciting because we get to introduce you to our next and actually closing speaker of the APAC segment. We've been here live for over 14 straight hours. Like, this bevy platform is still going. We're still here thanks to Led by Community, CMX, and the Community Collective. And so lastly, for the loop section now, we have Ilker, who is joining us all the way from England to speak about the coral reef effect, which is how communities create vibrant startup ecosystems. I'm so excited to run you through the purpose of this session and also introduce Ilker, because the last time we caught up was actually in London at London Community Week, which was very exciting. And I love this segue because we've just spoken and had this spicy debate about how VCs should be building community. Before that, we spoke about co-working spaces to actually understand what is happening in those physical environments. Before that, we heard about Asana and Canva and the case studies around how they build community. We spoke about not-for-profits, ROI. We had a community strategy workshop. We heard from Who Gives a Crap and designing connection online and friendships. And now we get to tie out this APAC segment with understanding the ecosystem at play. So Ilker, I'm really excited because today we get to learn from you, understanding how do you actually create a vibrant, a successful, impactful ecosystem, especially in the startup space. It's such a nuanced industry. And for anyone who also hasn't met Ilker before, I have the pleasure of explaining a little bit about what he does, because he is the founder and also a community strategist, and he's the co-founder of talentled.co. He's a strategy consultant. He's been helping multiple companies build community, but he specializes in two very complementary areas, which is building tech and innovation ecosystems, and then establishing talent communities. I know that you led volunteers like in London for the 2012 Olympics, which is just phenomenal. And I'm just so pumped for you to take the stage and share all of your secrets, because that's what we do here at Loop. We share the secrets. So Ilker, are you ready to share some secrets with us?
Well, I think I am, and it's so cool to be able to close this section, not from Australia, but somewhere else. So it's playing to the wonderful connective nature of this event, which is just absolutely great. And I'm so pleased and I'm so honored to be part of this this wonderful group from afar. And I would like to thank you and everyone else who asked me to join. And I really cannot be more excited to tell you more about what I've prepared, which is hopefully it will be significant. It will be a lot. And thank you for the wonderful introduction as well.
Oh, I'm just so grateful to have you here. Everyone in Australia is like, when are we hearing from Ilker? We have 274 people here live right now. So Ilker, please take us away and enjoy the show.
Fantastic. So cool. So here I am then, really wonderfully introduced by Paz, and my reputation precedes me, hopefully in a good way. And here's me just, doing the deed with regards to the presentations and everything. So hopefully once I share this, then you will be able to, see everything on the screen, and hopefully that will be just moving once I get going. So as Paz has been saying, I am doing community consultancy based in Europe, and for a little bit of a change, I'm not actually based in the UK. We're in Cambridge, where I usually am. I am actually based in Istanbul, in Turkey, where my home is, my hometown is, my family is. So it's just so fitting that I'm just making this connection where two continents meet, because basically in reality, this is also what I'm doing figuratively as well, between Europe, or let's say the old continent, with Oceania, and of course with the Asia Pacific. So it's just wonderful. So my talk is titled Coral Reef Effect: How Communities Create Vibrant Startup Ecosystems. So I work in the intersection of startup ecosystems and communities. So it's a bit of an interesting niche, I hope, to everyone. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, with a little bit of an Australian twist, of course, as you can imagine. So hopefully it's moving, and I can see it already has. And please, in the meantime, if you have any questions, thoughts, anything else, just fire them away in the public chats. And just before I start, it's a bit of sorry if you hear any kind of airplane noise in the background, because wonderfully I grew up in a flight path. So you might be able to just hear faintly some things in the background, but that's not the concept today. It is the coral reef, and it is the startup ecosystems. So coral reef it is, because it just made no sense not to include it. It is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. It is the perfect example of what an ecosystem is, and it is one of the wonderful things about Australia, the Great Barrier Reef, which is what you're actually seeing on the screen. And the coral reefs are perfect examples of ecosystems. And interestingly enough, in the only until recently, this terminology, this concept was actually used in the business context. How soon? Well, basically this soon. So that's the first bit. We're talking about entrepreneurial ecosystems and startup communities. And just by defining it, I can give you a bit more about the time when it was actually used. So again, it was defined as a concept in the 1930s, but it's only been used in the 1990s as a business concept. It was a community of organisms and its environment functioning as an ecological unit, and that's the definition of an ecosystem. And it was deemed that it was very similar to what we're actually seeing today in the business context, because especially in this day and age, the network of businesses that are connected to each other, just like an ecological ecosystem, through some complex interdependent parts, it was actually decided to refer to this kind of structure as an ecosystem. So just best to start the conversation today by defining what an ecosystem is in that context. So if you look at it that way, this is what we are actually referring to when you are hearing or when we're involved in any kind of ecosystem related conversation around us, whether it's businesses, startups, or anything else. So it's important to look at it this way, because everything that I will try and say today will be around connecting community building to that. And it is umbilically connected. It is very, closely connected. And hopefully, by the time I'm done with my talk, you will be able to make that strong connection yourself as well. And hopefully, you'll be involved in some kind of interesting efforts around it as well. So when you look at it, ecosystems, when I was just trying to, when I got fascinated by this connection, I was trying to just connect the community building to this concept for the first time in my own domain anyway. I came across, 2 authors, Brad Feld and Ian Hathaway. So they wrote a couple of books around it. And in their book titled The Startup Community Way in 2020, they actually tried to define this, the entrepreneurial ecosystem and startup communities. So starting with the 2 different concepts here. So an entrepreneurial ecosystem, just like an ecological system that I've just talked about, is an adaptive, interconnected, and most importantly, highly localized system that is self-organizing, self-governing, and self-sustaining when it comes to with all these entrepreneurial components that you actually have. And a startup community, or let's say a startup community within this larger entrepreneurial ecosystem, is the group of people that through their interactions, attitudes, interests, goals, and sense of purpose, basically they are who are fundamentally committed to helping entrepreneurs succeed. So we're talking about the system, we're talking about the bigger picture, which is the basically entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we have the group of people, which of course you may be able to just connect it to the archetypal community that are within this system that are trying to make this environment succeed. So there are some differences between the 2. So an entrepreneurial ecosystem is actually something that is top down. So it is somehow mandated, it is somehow curated, created for this, perhaps artificially in many cases. Whereas the startup communities are a bottom-up phenomenon. Basically, those are created by the people on the ground, and then they start to propagate. They start to form what's around them. So it's important to make that distinction. This is what Feld and Hathaway are doing. Of course, there's a 1001 way of defining an ecosystem, but this is what we're going to basically just follow through. So Feld and Hathaway, this is hopefully will be interesting to you. They try to define basically the ecosystem through 7 interesting capitals. So we are talking about things like, as you can see on you have things like the network capital, the institutional capital, physical capital, social capital, and of course things like human capital and institutional capital and the financial capital. So we're talking about 7 different capitals that constitute an entrepreneurship ecosystem. So this is fundamental to the conversation because you might actually already guess that I'm going to be connecting all this to various community building things. So this is another thing that I wanted to talk about from another book that Brad Feld himself actually wrote. It's called Startup Communities: Building an Entrepreneurial Ecosystem in Your City in 2012. So 8 years before the book that I talked about. He dissected the work and the success that was going in Boulder in Colorado in the US. And he came up with what we call a Boulder thesis. So these are some interesting attributes to the community that he observed over there and the success of the community in relation to the success that this place has actually gathered. So he came up with the Boulder thesis. So 4 things. He said that in order for any other place, just like Boulder, to be successful, there are 4 things that he's observed that must be done, in the sense that the entrepreneurs in this place must lead the startup community. So it's not anyone else or any kind of artificial leader. And these leaders must have a long-term commitment. And the startup community must be inclusive of anyone who wants to participate in it. This is quite important. It's not like some new founder comes in, they get overpowered by the people who've been there for a long time. Or so this inclusivity and this sort of equal sort of voice is very, very important on that one. And of course, the startup community must have continual activities that engage the entire entrepreneurial stack. So this is important because it's like a lot of entrepreneurial ecosystem efforts that we see. They don't have this kind of longevity. They just start with things and just it doesn't really work. They also identified that there are 3 startup personas in an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and these are leaders, feeders, and instigators. So the leaders are the entrepreneurs, and those are the people who actually just bring the entrepreneurial ecosystem forward, and they have a deep understanding of the challenges and the opportunities in building businesses in that ecosystem. The feeders are all the mechanisms, all the places that are, or all the organizations that are actually feeding, that are actually supporting these leaders. And of course, you have the instigators. The instigators, maybe in your own ecosystem, you might be able to figure out. Those are the sort of people, the selfless people, the connectors, the people behind the scenes who absolutely love to make the system tick, make the system work. So if you look at it like this, these are essential components of a startup community, of some kind of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Basically, if you look at it like this, if you look at it from a community lens, you can really see that there are a lot of things that you can do as a community builder to keep the system going, or keep the system succeeding even further. So I can see from the comments that just people are really sort of just a few light bulbs are actually going on, and therefore hopefully I will be able to just to get you to connect community building even further to the success of this ecosystem, thanks to, of course, these people who have actually laid the ground in getting us to understand these kinds of ecosystem structures more. So this is my take on this thing. So we are talking about the startup communities, and looking at the Boulder thesis. I would like to say most definitely that the idea identifying and encouraging community leaders who are the entrepreneurs, it must be central to any kind of community building or community prolonging work that you might have in an ecosystem. And of course, ensuring them to have long-term commitments, ensuring that this community is safe, welcoming, and inclusive, and of course, planning for sustainable community engagement, making sure that the feeders are well connected, are well feeding the community, so to speak. And of course, community instigators are well supported. They have the opportunities basically to be able to instigate, to be able to get the community to to go further. And of course, having these startup communities intentional and not just just talking about everything, anything, but all the conversations are centered around the success of the startup communities are central. When you look at it like this, it's common sense. Any community builder is probably going to be planning for this kind of thing. But it is so refreshing to see what we understand in the community world and what Brad Feld and Hathaway have actually just designed coinciding. Anyway, let's go to the second act. So you have the 101 on entrepreneurship ecosystems and the success factors involving startup communities and entrepreneurship ecosystems. Let's go a little bit around the world because I am, just somewhere else. So it's only fitting that, I tell a little bit more about the entrepreneurship ecosystems, and there's nowhere better to start than the Bay Area itself. Of course, it's the number one ecosystem in the world. It is wonderful because it's all, so to speak, just like the Great Barrier Reef. It's all natural. It's sort of formed by itself. Most components are basically they've been there for some time, and of course, just with billions and billions of value, it is the first thing that comes to our mind. It is the North Star for all kinds of ecosystem work that is actually going on around it. And when you look at it, when you look at the seven capitals, so Gary Fowler actually put together this piece, which coincides so well with Feld and Hathaway's thinking. So there's a culture of innovation and risk taking, which was one of the capitals of success in the Silicon Valley. There's lots and lots of venture capital, as you know. The talent concentration is superb, is second to none. There are lots of success stories. This is super important, and perhaps it could be something that we might already start thinking about in Australia. And of course, there is a super top of the world kind of network over there. You can actually just connect with everyone. Everybody's so keen to be able to connect with each other and then basically contribute to each other's success in a way. And of course, there are world-class universities like Stanford, all sorts of different like Berkeley. So there are lots of interesting schools, top of the world kind of schools that are actually contributing to this ecosystem. And of course, there are supportive infrastructure and policies around California, around the Bay Area. So as you can see, if you dissect it this way, again, not something that we don't know, but if you look at it this way, it actually gives us a great basis to be able to support them with communities. So going back to Europe, because I know that well, and I'm somewhere in this picture normally. So we have what they call there's a million ways of calling what's actually happening around the world in relation to Palo Alto, which is where the valley is, or which is part of the valley. We call this in Europe the new Palo Alto Science Supercluster. Basically, where just within 4 hours commuting distance, all these sort of clusters that you have here, the ones in the UK, in France, in the Netherlands, and in all sorts of other places. So it is true, the geographical proximity is just great because we're able to connect these ecosystems there, and only collectively, of course, we stand a chance to be able to be so let's say remotely as successful as the actual Palo Alto itself. So that's what we call it. And then out of here, this is somewhere that I know well because it is home. It's only 150,000 people, but it is punching well above its weight. It's got a value of 191 billion for a small town. It is just crazy, but it is what it is. We have loads of interesting entrepreneurship activities. It's not just university. It's not just, one couple of companies. It basically is the 18% of the total value of UK tech, which is just mad for a small town. London's around 60%, but London is a worldwide brand. Cambridge, perhaps you didn't know, it is actually one of the biggest entrepreneurial ecosystems in Europe, if not the world in its own class. It actually produced more unicorns per capita than anywhere else in the world. A little bit older. This is from 2024, but it is still there. I think we're either number one or number two. When this was drawn, we were actually producing more unicorns per capita than the valley itself as well. And of course, as a deep tech hub, which is what Cambridge is about, it ranks number 3 globally, behind the US counterparts. We're talking about Greater Boston, and basically after that, we are just number 3, which again for a small town is just madness. So there are factors of the Cambridge cluster. So enough about boasting about around Cambridge. This is about Australia. This is what is important to know. So again, this is another article from Shekhar, and I've put together with the 7 capitals that we actually have. So in the human intellectual capital, the proximity to the university is just key. It is what this town is about. Financially, we've historically had really good access to venture capital and all kinds of financial opportunities, thanks to the work of the people around there. Institutionally, it's been very supportive. So Cambridge has been really very well supported as an ecosystem by the government, and of course by all the institutions around. Cultural and network, there's a collaborative culture, and physically there's a lot of infrastructure and resources. There are 36 research parks around Cambridge. For a small town is a lot, but that means that the infrastructure, it becomes one of the advantages of the ecosystem. If you look at it like this, perhaps you've already started just applying this to your own ecosystem, because it's the success breeds success. What this is about is if you have a successful startup, it basically starts just going around. It starts providing a talent flywheel and a capital flywheel. It attracts more talent, it attracts more capital. So it is imperative that if there's a successful startup or a set of startups, so to speak, those are nurtured, because they're just bringing more than their startup. They're affecting the entire ecosystem. And of course, there's another one, Skype. Maybe you have already used it back in the early 2000s. I have quite a lot. But they had actually loads and loads of alumni in Europe once they started as a company, as a successful startup in the 2000s. And of course, we're talking about just over 9,000, nearly 9,000 companies have been initiated after this sort of wave of the success in 2000s. So as you can see, it is just creating this sort of wave effect, this ripple effect, basically across an ecosystem. So that's why it is perhaps important to be able to contribute to it even as a community builder. This is me, the 7 capitals. If there's one thing that you take away from this event, from this conversation, is this. Basically, this is my take on what kind of communities that you can possibly build. Don't worry if you are keen on this and you can't wait for any kind of recording, if there's going to be any. In the end, I'm going to have a bit of a surprise for you to be able to reach these, what I've just already said. But you can actually build talent communities to connect to facilitate the human capital. You can get some research communities going on around. I guess this is already connected with you as a professional. On the funding communities, it makes a lot of sense to put together communities of stakeholders across the funding mechanism. Institutional relationship, facilitate the conversations around institutions paving the way for your startup success. Get some hyper-localized communities. You can even put together communities for just single building floor, whatever. Culture champion. There's a culture of risk-taking. There's a culture of success in startups. Rituals. Why not put together communities where these are discussed, these are promoted in some ways? And of course, social and networking is what the Australians do well, and that's what we're going to come to in a moment. Speaking of Australia, here we are, swatting the startup ecosystem in Australia. SWOT, as you might know, remember, it is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is from the latest Deal Room report, which is an ecosystem intelligence agency, which is something that an organization that I really, really like and follow. I've put together this SWOT for you for Australia. So this is where hopefully it makes a lot of sense if you're just connecting from there, which I presume you are predominantly. We have some strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Let's go around them. We are talking about massive growth, capital efficiency, and the weaknesses. We have some underfunding, we have some distribution issues, and on some opportunities, we have some outlier founders and strong investments. While in the threats bit, things that are a little bit traditional and the success culture barriers. Perhaps you already have guessed some of the things that I've been talking about. Of course, it's not an exhaustive list, but let's have this list within the conversation that we already have now. So it is a massively growing ecosystem. It generated $360 billion in value. It's up 6.5%, 6.5 times since 2018, which is just absolutely just really massive growth. And basically, it just makes it globally number 2 in terms of the ecosystem value growth since 2020. And as you know, it's not been plain sailing around the world. So having this kind of growth for Australia as an ecosystem is a great success. So I think that this is something that we can instigate through the use of communities. So that's a bit of a strength that we can actually just talk a little bit about. What's another strength that Australia has is the building big with little resources. So what it is about is basically, even though it actually had, less than $34 billion in VC money since 2020, it actually has, hasn't really, 2000, it has actually built all these, wonderful companies, including all these, just wonderful startups, wonderful success stories like Canva and Atlassian that you actually can see over here. So Australia is very good at being, efficient with capital. And of course, it is number 1 in unicorn creation per dollar invested. It is the top ecosystem, as you can actually see. So this is a really, really important thing that we should be building on as a strength, and perhaps communities could be the key to keep this going and keep this getting stronger even further. What's the weakness is an underfunded startup ecosystem. So there hasn't been, that much funding, well, compared to all the other ecosystems. So this could be, present a problem. So it's a bit of a weakness. So we must be doing something about that one. And certainly the uneven distribution of tech focus as well. As you know, the large parts of the country is, there's a lot of concentration on one part. There's less concentration in the others. So we're talking about, places like, New South Wales, Queensland, and Victoria, just basically getting the big part of, just investment basically over here. So that's a bit of an uneven distribution. Hopefully some of the events that I've talked about is going to resolve this in a way, but this sort of uneven distribution could be a bit of a problem when you're talking about like a big entire growth of the country in a way. What's an opportunity? There's a lot of strong capital flowovers from overseas. So compared to the other ecosystems, there's a lot of capital that's coming from abroad. So I can already see some community work being able to just capitalize on this. But certainly it's higher than both the United States and Europe, as you can see. There's a lot of capital that's actually flowing from overseas in that regard, and that's an interesting opportunity to bank on even more. And it's also a place where there's a lot of outlier founders basically being here. What's an outlier founder is basically the founder that is extraordinary, just gone all the way to places like the US to be able to get the company to succeed. Australia is a bit of a factory in this one, so there's a lot of interesting success stories in that regard. And certainly the universities are helping out as well. They're some of the top universities in the world in some respects, and certainly their alumni are just a wonderful source of outlier founders. So we can already maybe perhaps support that with communities. And it is also a maturing startup ecosystem. So there's been a lot of companies that exit. There are a lot of companies that are waiting to exit. And of course, a lot of companies that are up and coming. So if you look at it like this already, an ecosystem connecting all that kind of thing it could be a very good advantage. And of course, we have a bit of a threat bit, which is the traditional tech investment focus trends. This trend is quite interesting. So as you can see, in the pre-boom, in the boom, and the post-boom, when you look at it like this, there's been a lot of shift in the industry. So traditionally, it's now going into energy, health, and media, while the world is actually investing in places like AI, and also it's taking the foot off the gas from fintech as well. So lots of interesting changes over here, and perhaps this might actually result in a bit of a boat being missed. And of course, if you're Australian, I don't know it very well, but I'm looking at it from afar. There's this concept called the tall poppy syndrome, which is basically people talking excessively in some ways, just like they would do in the United States, perhaps in some kind of success, because it's part of the culture in that way. Is not very well received in Australia. Perhaps it's called the tall poppy syndrome. It's not about just success, but it is the way it is actually being portrayed, but it might actually be harming some of the startup storytelling. So this is from the innovationals.com. If you don't know it, I'm not going to go a lot of into detail, but culturally there are some barriers as well in terms of the founders being able to tell, being able to basically connect with, getting people to connect with the success stories of the startups. What can we do very, very quickly? This hopefully you will like. So on the strengths, you can actually put together some go-to-market and growth maximization communities for yourself. This is my suggestions. You can do some other things as well. Also, communities on sharing efficiency, stories, so that other startups can actually do this. On the strengths is that. On the weaknesses, put together communities around funding, around finance. Make sure the inter-regional connections are massive or just better. In terms of the outlier founders, basically get outlier founders to connect with each other and of course with the ecosystem. On the investment, you can get some strong overseas investment communities basically to mitigate that, to use that opportunity to the maximum. And of course, on the threats, you can actually put together communities around AI and other underfunded or under-focused areas. And of course, you can put together communities to make success storytelling and repositioning better. And just looking at this, just recapping the 7 capitals. This is my take on this thing. Basically, loads of different things you can do. This is the similar recommendations, but laid out in a different way with 7 capitals. These are the things that you can do. Basically, the bottom line of all these suggestions that I've put together for Australia is to be able to connect them. Just you're talking about a startup founder becoming an investor, or just being able to connect with the talent around them, and of course connect with the institutional players that they have around. So accelerating a little bit, because this is one final thing that I wanted to talk about. Brisbane 2032. Paz said that I work for London Olympic Games, which means that I'm able to tell you a little bit more about the opportunity that Brisbane 2032 Summer Olympic Games can actually bring as a closing conversation. Why is it important? It's a massive thing for community building. It was the most followed games ever. This is Paris 2024 last year, and I was there. It was just the energy was just crazy. And if you look at the statistics over here, from the one thing you can take away from this is from 2020, we are talking about 290% increase in engagement. And there's an athlete community that's already put together by the IOC. And already this is actually just going around in Queensland. There's a talent search for new athletes like this, the Olympic Sports Talent Identification Program, and it's already yielding results. They've already identified 346 talents that are the future superstars. And this is what I leave you with. You can actually put together some athlete talent communities, some Olympic brand and fan communities, and Olympic startup communities, basically connecting athlete founders with the Olympic opportunity. If you're in Brisbane, if you're in Australia, so those are the things that you can do, because why? We will be nothing without the community. And this is my final surprise. If you want to read more about the things that I've just put together, this is what you can actually use to be able to get this presentation. It's all yours. If you have any questions, hit me up. Thank you very much. And I hope you liked what you saw.
Of course, we did, Ilka. That was absolutely awesome and just so cool to see. I guess like how all the pillars come together. Myself and Maddie here have been listening in intently, taking notes, which is just very exciting. And we've got actually some questions here for you, Ilka. So we've got about 10 to 15 minutes left. And so if anyone here wants to ask Ilka a question, you can post in the Q&A box, not in the chat, in the Q&A box, which would be amazing. But Ilka, are you ready for some Q&A? Because we've got some questions here.
I am. Let's go.
Amazing, amazing. Well, Ilka, we've got a question here from Enos, and she is asking, she's curious to know more about what makes Australia good at building efficiently. Like, is Australia just better at building communities in the ecosystem, or what kind of factors come into play there?
Well, there's a lot of factors that are actually there. So it's about, I guess, the concentration. It comes to a number of different factors. So it could be around concentration. It could be about the ecosystem at the moment, especially where those startups are just being so efficient, and of course these success stories being being put together by very, very, efficient, very, very enthusiastic startup entrepreneurs and leaders. Like, we're talking about Canva and Atlassian. So those are, just, major brands in their own right. So they've been very much successful. Actually, somehow its sort of weakness has become its sort of asset in that regard. Because when you look at it like this, we're talking about an ecosystem that is still relatively quite big, and it is an entire continent. But the number of, let's say, successful global startups there's just a certain number of them, unlike some other continents where there's been a lot. So that might actually just mean that the people who've put together these kinds of startups, they've been really, really diligent with the way that the growth trajectory for these startups have actually been. So that might be the reason why it's actually been efficient. So again, you just got to look at the individual success stories in that regard. But it is a good thing to know to do, because these outlier leaders, these outlier founders, have actually created a blueprint. And this is what I wanted to just underline, that this blueprint has to be told more, has to be distributed more, so that other startups can actually do the same thing as well.
100%. And it comes down to also trends and what we've seen in the past. And we have a question here about, what does the future hold? Based on the knowledge that you have and the studies that you have, like, where is the industry going, and what are you kind of seeing in terms of the trends and what the future holds?
Well, in terms of the trend and what the future holds, well, basically, so we live in a very different time. So I think my connection, or my reference to just some things being too traditional or too safe in a way could be a hint of my answer. So when I started my career a long time ago, it wasn't about foundership. It was about just working in an international company, just becoming some kind of just a manager of sorts, and then basically retiring. But the world is very different. And I think it's Daniel Presley, who's from Australia. He's a guy that I follow so much. He's an entrepreneur and also an enabler and investor. It is say that we live in a very exciting time, despite everything that is happening around us, because it is the time for affordable sort of micro businesses in some ways. So in my time, when you wanted to become a founder, basically you just had to pay a lot of money for the infrastructure, because cloud computing didn't exist. But now today you can actually start an AI company, you can start a technology company with zero investment nearly, and all you need is a good idea and an execution. So this kind of sort of affordable sort of startup structure has never happened in this sort of fashion. So this is what the industry is, but that also requires a culture shift, and this is also what we're wrestling in Europe as well, in the sense that what we're talking about. It's important to go to the definition of startup. A startup is a small idea that can actually be replicated, can actually be scaled, very, very quickly. And we're missing that kind of definition in a more traditional place. And I think that Australia is also trying to shed this skin in some respects. And this is what I felt around sort of overcoming the tall poppy syndrome, or just, focusing on other, let's say, things like, AI and, fintech still, even with the trends, and community could be a key in that one. So those are the things. So this is what the future holds. Important to catch the times, if you like. And I think that, also just the final thing that I've shared, the Olympic opportunity has actually changed a lot of things in the UK since 2012. And it is changing a lot of things around. This is also what's happening in Paris as well. Since last year, they've been crowned as one of the innovation capital in Europe, just passing London, which was unthinkable until quite recent. So those are the things that I'm saying. So take these opportunities to be able to conform, to be able to just get up on the wave, as you like, if you're in Australia. And that's what the future holds, I think.
Well, it's such a different landscape now, right? As you say, there's AI, there's tech, things are changing. We're in a completely different era, and there are so many other variables at play. So I love how you've kind of highlighted that, and it just makes so much sense. We've got time for a couple more questions before the APAC segment ends of Loop, Ilker. Oh my God. London's just waking up right now. I mean, what time is it for you over in England?
Well, I'm in Istanbul, so 9:39. So that'd be 7:39. A very nice and crisp sort of British morning. But we will see. We'll wait for our friends to tell how they're feeling.
Mate, over in Europe, just pop over to Istanbul, go over to Spain. When I went to London, it was just a short 27-hour flight, I
Oh,
think.
wonderful. But you see,
So,
in terms of
yeah.
technology, this is also interesting. So I think it is now Qantas and a couple of other, providers that are now just trying with this sort of non-stop flights around the world. This is going to change a lot of things on the entrepreneurship as well. So better connection is always going to be beneficial. So if you're going to be making it easy, even with these huge distances, for Australia to connect using technology in transport and other things, it's even going to make an effect. So just there's nothing that is off limits in contribution to the startup and ecosystem success.
I love it, Ilka. We could sit here for another 9 hours of the rest of Loop and keep chatting, but we have got to wrap it in just a moment. So, Ilka, the final question is,
Yes.
if you had your career again and you were going to build a successful startup ecosystem, what do you think is the first thing that you really need to get right? So if you had your time again, you were going to build a startup ecosystem, you had, clean slate, what would you do as the first really important step?
Fun enough, I love the question, and I love the closing question, because it's exactly what my consultancy does at this moment. And I'm working with different ecosystem players, or ecosystem, let's say, leaders, so to speak, around the world. So, well, I guess the first thing, it's not surprising, is to set a direction, intention, and a strategy. So basically, just saying that, or thinking about doing something is okay, is great, but to put together a strategy around how to do it first is, I think, it's crucial. So this is also what's happening with a lot of community work as well. It also means that just people are just building a community, and then they say, well, I'll just put an intention, to put a direction to it once the community has started. You and I know well that it doesn't work that way. So I guess that the best thing to do is to put together, just look at the strengths of this particular ecosystem. Every ecosystem can stand for a bit of a niche, or a number of niches, and every place has got this kind of, let's say, call it an unfair advantage, which I think Australia has as well in some good respects. So putting that direction together, and then basically building an ecosystem strategy around it, is absolutely key. So this is common sense, what I just said, but as a strategy consultant, I see a lot of things happening the other way. So I have a duty to underline that the mechanism goes this way. If you do it like this, I always say this, everything that you do in an ecosystem, as somebody who's shaping it, every single thing that you do, every event that you put together, every person that you call to an event, and every kind of activity that you design must actually serve that intention, purpose, and strategy. Again, very common sense, but it's important to remind ourselves because it just happens otherwise in a lot of places. And I wish all the best to wonderful Australia, which I've never been, but I would love to come.
Okay, you have to come and visit us. I mean, there's a lot of us over here, and it's a great country. So, Ilker, thank you so much for closing the APAC segment of Loop. We've done part 1 in the US time zone with Beth McIntyre from CMX. We are just wrapping now part 2, which has been with myself, Paz Pazarski, for APAC, and Ilker as our closing speaker, right? You know what they say about leaving the last speaker. And of course, we're now about to segue into the European time zone for the last 8 hours of Loop. So, Ilker, thank you so much for being our closing speaker for this segment. I've been dying to get you in as a speaker so all of APAC can listen to you. So this has been amazing. We've had 275 people stay online and absorb all of your knowledge. And we've had over 1,022 people RSVP so far for Loop, and they'll all be getting the recording. So, Ilker, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day in Istanbul. I'll see you later in Australia.
Thanks so much.
Have a
Really
great
appreciate it.
week.